Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. This is our second episode of XenForo Insights. Our goal is just to share what we know about online communities and forums. We tend to stick to a topic or two per episode. This is our second episode. This time we're going to do a little bit of a different structure. And last time was pretty, I guess, scheduled, and this is going to be more open. We're going to have three experts talk about moving to Zenforo. We have with us today Kier of Zenforo, and we have Mike of Audentio, and then we do
Hello.
have, hi, and then we do have a super special guest, Stuart of AV Forums. And these three are going to discuss moving to Zenforo. They have combined several decades, presumably, of experience in the community space, and probably these three know more about Zenforo than anybody, hey? Something like that. So, oh, we had slides for this. If Kier and Mike, if you'd like to begin, we've got moving to Zenforo.
Hi everyone, thanks Megan. So today we're going to be talking about moving to Zenforo, but we're merging into that how to manage upgrades as well. So it's all about taking data from one format to another format, and whether that's an older version of Zenforo to a new version, or from a foreign platform over to Zenforo in the first place. So we're going to talk about the best way to plan and to carry out your upgrade or your migration. We're going to intermingle the terms migration and import. Sorry for the inconsistency there. We're going to talk about the problems that you may come up against, and how to protect against those, and potentially what to do if you encounter them. And we're going to talk about user acceptance, the process, and we're just going to see how it goes, and just keep chatting while the subject is still interesting.
Yep. So, and the reason I think we did this kind of format was because, there's so many moving parts in a migration. I mean, I tell people, like, to get it perfect, there could be like 1,000 tasks that you do, and that shouldn't be like a scary thing. It's just, if you want your migration or your upgrade to go smoothly, we've done it so many times. We can just, we're going to talk about a bunch of different things you can think about, and different strategies, and that's why we asked Stu to come along. So Stu's runs one of the largest Zenforo forums in the world. Stu, do you want to, I guess, tell us a little bit about yourself, and how you maybe even start us off with what you were doing when you were deciding to move to Zenforo, and anything else you'd like to add.
Okay, I started AV Forums in 2000. That was originally on, I can't even remember the software that we were on then. We went to vBulletin, and that's where I got to know Kier. Incredibly trustworthy releases on vBulletin, and then that all went downhill, and we waited longer than we wanted to move from vBulletin 3 to Zenforo in 2013. We had to do a lot of preparation for it, because we've got millions of posts. I can't remember, it's about a third, maybe a quarter of a million members. So a lot of records to transfer from vBulletin to Zenforo. And at the same time, we developed an editorial system to complement the forums, which we're still using now. We started developing it in vBulletin, but then changed to Zenforo once we made the decision to move to that. That was the most expensive element of migrating. It cost tens of thousands of pounds. AV Forums is a business. We're a small business. We're just a small number of people, and we all work from home. So this COVID thing hasn't been very disruptive from that point of view. But it's still quite expensive to run, because we have an editorial team, and so we developed this at the same time as migrating to Zenforo. So there's a lot happening, probably too much. and we made lots of decisions to change the style as well, so that when we launched in Zenforo, which it was relatively a smooth process, really, because there was a lot of preparation for it. But when we launched in it, we'd changed too many things. I mean, we changed the fonts and everything. And so that was probably the biggest thing that I learned from it, was not to change too much, but prepare as much as you can, get as much help from all the different people who are involved with your website, from hosting, the moderators, anybody else who happens to be working on it. Make sure that you get across as much functionality as you can that you want to keep, but don't keep stuff that you don't really need. So there were a lot of plugins for vBulletin that we had. One, for example, was the likes or thanks. Kia, there weren't likes in the original vBulletin 3, were there? Or were there? There were
No,
likes,
they
but not
weren't.
thanks. No. So we got, I can't remember how many tens of thousands of likes, and that's important user engagement. We wanted to keep that. So that was one of the things that we wanted to migrate, and that was included in the plan. And we paid somebody, Jake Bunce, actually, who's I think still active on Zenforo, to help us with the migration. That was worth every penny. So yeah, it was a big process, but and took a long time to prepare for it, mostly because of developing the editorial system. But it was absolutely worth it. And if you're still using vBulletin now, or any other kind of older forum software, you should be feeling a pressure to migrate to more modern software, because the user interface, niceties, are things that people expect. Have I said too much?
No,
No,
not at all.
No, I
So
think you're fine.
Okay,
So
I'll stop there
I
then.
guess if for someone who is looking to migrate rather than to upgrade, then there needs to be the decision process as to whether or not you actually want to move to Zenforo in the first place. And there are a host of different things that you can do to base your decision on. So you could go and take a look at setting up a live demo on zenforo.com and just comparing the functionality of what you're currently running on your site to what you would potentially have if you move to Zenforo. There's the community forums as well, where of course you can go and post and ask questions and find out if there are particular analogs between something that you do on your existing system and something that that you would potentially hope to continue to do. And you may find that quite often there are features in forum software X that aren't present in Zenforo with the same name, but you might find that actually the functionality that you want is just a combination of a number of different systems brought together, and you may actually find that almost everything that you want to do is already there. You just need to know where to find it. So that's one element of the preparation to work out whether or not you're going to migrate in the first place. But once you have decided that you're going to move, then you need to start preparing to actually get the data across.
And I think that's a good segue kind of for like these three main groups that we've got here, right? We've kind of got the preparing stage, right? The early stage, educating yourself and planning and using the forums and, finding some help, talking to your server management team, your sysadmins, your DevOps, whoever that might be, your developers. Doing your research, and then we've got, so that's what we're calling, like, for the sake of this presentation, it's the preparing stage, and then there's the performing stage, which is the actual doing the migration, and finally finalizing. And what are the things you should do post migration, post upgrade, right? What are the things that are good to do after the fact? And there's a whole list of resources that we were kind of talking when we were planning this presentation, like, should we go over a bunch of different technical documents and do a bunch of different I don't know, examples and live demos. But today, we just wanted to kind of serve as like a panel to talk through some of these things and make sure that it's not so bad. I mean, I do migrations weekly. They're not so bad. And it's something that when your members, when they hear you're about to leave their old platform and go to something modern like Zenforo, I mean, that's the best part of you as a community manager. That's the best thing ever, because you're just seeing all these positive feedbacks, and there's excitement, and there's there's so much overall joy of the fact that their home, their little community is going to get something beautiful. But so I guess let's start right with preparing, and just what are some of the most the best things to do when you're just preparing for a migration or a move to Zenforo. And I think as Keir was just starting, right, you were talking about like feature parity, right, looking at features and what how you can discern which features from your current platform you're going to be able to move to Zenforo. Is that right?
Yeah. Now, one thing that we don't have right now, but I've actually started working on it, is a complete list of the data that exists in some of our source systems for our importers. So like a document of, this system has posts, we can take your post. This system has likes, we can take your likes. But this system also has reactions. We're not going to be able to do that. Although in this particular case, we are going to be able to do that. So for the source systems that we have in the official importers, which we've started to refer to as XFI, there will, before too long, be a formal document, so that you know exactly what it's going to be that you can expect to retain in terms of the data that you already have.
It'd be interesting if we could do some of that work for VB3 or 4, which is what is the most common format that I see moving to Zenforo. There's and there's a lot of forum software out there, but if you look through their documentation, they may have something like that. I don't know, but I'd be curious to see if VB3, VB4, what is that? 80% of all migrations are from that software.
So the VB4 one is quite an interesting one, because we extended our importers to handle the blog add-on that I think debuted with VB 3.6 maybe, or something around that time, and then the data format changed quite dramatically for VB4 and then again for VB5. And people quite often ask us, well, I've got loads of data in the vBulletin blog. What's going to happen to that? Because Zenforo doesn't have, at this particular point, a blog add-on or blog functionality. But what we do at the moment is we import all of that as threads and posts. If you take a look at the forum types announcement that we made when we brought out version 2.2, I talked about the fact that almost everything that a forum does shares this structure of a forum containing discussions which contain posts, and blogs are really no different. So although we don't have full blog functionality, we don't throw your data away. We just import it into the closest data format that we have.
Mike, you both touched a little bit on being able to transfer things for like features and add-ons. And it looks like we have a question submitted that says, my forum has a thanks/likes feature on it. How can I migrate that to Zenforo? So I feel like that's a little bit relevant for now, if anyone wants to answer that.
Yeah, and I mean, the first question is, of course, what is your software? Is it custom? Is it vBulletin? Is it IPB? Is it vanilla? There's dozens and dozens of community software out there. And depending on, how we, it's a question, like you as a community manager, you will probably want to ask that in the Zenforo community, or talk to your host maybe, or talk to a developer on your team if you have one, or a third-party service provider, and just figure out what that looks like, because the most important data structures are, of course, your users, and I don't mean to refer to them as data structures, but the most important pieces of data will just be your users, and that's the thing you want to make sure migrates as much as perfectly. But when it comes to things like thanks, or like even sometimes proprietary features, you'll want to kind of do exactly just what we're talking about, right? What's in Zenforo 2, I assume that 2.2, if that's the latest, I would suspect everyone would want to move to. And what was in your other platform, your current legacy platform? Because if there is a system for likes on your post or something, then there is a method of migrating that over. Zenforo has a wide range of stock migration scripts. So if you're lucky enough to be on a platform that we have a script for already, great. And if you're not, you can always do custom migration scripts. So the technical details sometimes are need to be worked out, but is it possible? Of course it's possible. Zenforo comes with a native not only just a like system, but an entire reaction system, which allows you to do more than just like. You can care, you can say wow, you can show sadness, you can show a number of different reactions or emotions. So yes, definitely possible.
Awesome. Thank you. Since we're doing QA, would you guys mind if I did another one really quick?
You go ahead.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we do have quite a bit submitted at this point, which is great. And this one might actually be something that Stu would have a lot of input on. It says, my SMF forum has a sidebar with links/ads. How do I migrate that to Zenforo? How does that work on a mobile device? So I think all three of you actually could have some really good input. What do you guys think?
Yeah, so sidebars. Well, does everybody agree that people should, when designing pages, put mobile first now?
That tends to be the biggest market, though. You quite often tend to get a less rich experience on mobile still. So I don't think that we've got.
That's a great question. Like it really is. Like what Stu's referring to when he says mobile first is he's talking about the perspective in which you think about your platform, right? Is it you're thinking about them on an app environment, a native environment, you're on your phone, you're on your mobile browser. Is that your core user, or is your core user someone on a desktop? And the answer is that it depends, right, Kier? So like there's people who want that very rich experience like you're talking about, and there's people who want a more simplistic experience. And it really kind of depends on what niche you're in. Like, for example, if you're in a very technical space, like research or academia or or something very, very technical development, I mean, you're gonna probably be on a desktop first. But many people, they also like to use forums from when they're out and about on the train or wherever that might be. So I mean, it
quite an interesting metric on that one is actually an awful lot of sites now are seeing that most of their traffic comes from mobile. But what that misses the story of, but how many participants are on mobile? And that's a completely different story.
Yeah, that's a great point. Because so many people like to peruse and read, but how many actually engage and write? And forums as a format, communities as a format, often, how do they differ from social media and chat systems, right? I mean, forums, it's where you go to ask a very detailed question, a nuanced question, right? It's where you want to deeply engage on a very particular issue. Often, I mean, not always. There's plenty of communities out there that are more general and casual. But it really, I mean, it's a good question. I know that Stu kind of just threw that out there, like, what is this? But it is a good question that your analytics software can help you determine. But maybe that's a question for another day, because we could talk all day about that. But
I'm
sorry,
Stu,
to interrupt.
I'm sorry. I'm just looking at my stats now for the last 30 days. So 55% mobile, 39% desktop, and 5 and something percent tablet. So going back to that original question, yeah, sidebars are so it's quite easy as someone who's an admin of a forum to take sidebars for granted and say, okay, well, let's put some useful tools in the sidebar, some search facilities and stuff like that. And by default on Zenforo, on a tablet in portrait and on mobile, that sidebar gets pushed down to the bottom, where it will be completely lost. So that is a consideration. You need to think about how to present these tools that you want to include on the page, and advertising. And I can talk from the perspective of advertising, because we have as much as we can possibly do without completely trashing the user experience on AV forums because it is so expensive to run. So we have to have as much advertising as we can. And what you tend to do is the advertising tends to be larger elements within posts, say. So if you have 30 posts on a page, you'll put them after posts 10 and 20, that sort of thing. And other elements, I mean, I think my preferred solution at the moment is to have quite a prominent method of sliding out the sidebar for tools. But that's not ideal because, well, it's still hidden, isn't it? And unless people know it's there, quite often they'll miss it. So yeah, it's an interesting question.
I guess if the question is, can I replicate the sidebar functionality that I had on SMF, I think you said, then yes, you can. Whether you should or not is a different question. But do the tools exist? Yes, we have a widget system, and I'm pretty sure that there's a straight HTML widget which would allow you to place a widget in the sidebar of whichever pages you want it to appear on, and then you can fill that with any links or whatever HTML you want at all. There may even be a third-party widget that would allow you to take individual links and then dynamically populate them, for example. So yes,
sorry, Keir, just as an example of that, we wanted to show people the latest video on our YouTube channel. So I mean, I have a coder that we use, and he created a widget to do that. It wasn't particularly difficult. The widget system's great on Zenforo.
So I guess in terms of bringing the data across from your SMF sidebar, there are no tools to do it directly, and it's not going to be part of the standard import process. But the data can certainly be brought across once your import is complete. You just need to set up the widgets and the positions that you want, and then populate them. So it's
right.
Probably not a great deal of work.
And that brings us to, like, you know, this preparing step in general, right? You'll find that there's going to be a lot of little things that you have to just write down. In fact, what I do when I do a migration is we have, you know, we have a list of things that we do that, you know, we can do early before any data gets migration. This is typically your themes, some of your core add-ons. This can be things like announcements, you know, emails that you want to send out. This could be, obviously, you know, talking with your host, like I mentioned, talking with Zenforo community members for little details. But what I do is I have the things that I can do before the data migration, and I've got my things, my list of things I can only do after. And some things like, you know, tweaking the, you know, the sidebar or something, you know, using Zenforo structures like the very detailed widget system. You know, you just want to make yourself a note, like, hey, you know, as soon as we go live, maybe we keep the board private while we do a little bit of cleanup. But, you know, adding something like, you know, a little widget, or, you know, what I always do is I love to put a little, you know, announcement at the top after the migration. I say something like, you know, welcome, we're back now, with a link right to a thread. So anybody who's got any questions or concerns, there's a direct call to action for them to go engage on, you know, things that they might be having trouble with. And that would be the same for, you know, any of these little details. And you know, what's an important thought too here is, don't stress the details. You know, what's the most important thing? I go back to it, you know, making sure the users have a smooth migration.
Mm-hmm.
And Zenforo comes with a slew of stock features to make sure that that happens. So, you know, sometimes if you don't have an add-on, or, you know, even those thanks, you know, just tell the users that, like, hey, you know, we weren't able to migrate those thanks right now. Members will understand, especially if you tell them beforehand. Members love to know beforehand little details like this, because they know what to expect, you know, especially your power users, you know, your moderators, the people who visit your site so frequently. Just let them know, you know, hey, you know, don't worry, you guys are coming over, you know, we got your emails, we got all your, you know, we even got your avatars, right? We got your private messages, we got all this, you know, and if you have to tell them, you know, we weren't able to bring over something, they'll understand, because you know what, they'll be able to recreate that content. I mean, I don't think, you know, it'll affect them too much. And so telling them in advance about some of these details, and definitely telling them after, will keep your community members, you know, perfectly happy as a general rule.
So I think it's probably worth going into some detail at this point about what the migration process actually does. What are we even talking about? And for the most part, what we're talking about is you will get a migration script. maybe you're going to be using the official Zenforo ones, or maybe you're using something that's been customized. But one thing that they'll all have in common is that the import tool that you're going to use is going to be provided with the details to access the data for your existing software. And then it's going to run it through some sort of translation system and insert it in Zenforo format into a fresh Zenforo database. Now, some people have talked about it, the migration process being a little bit like moving house, because you take your existing furniture and everything that's in the house and you move it, and it's going to be in new places in the destination. But fundamentally, everything that you like about your old house is going to be in your new house, unless it doesn't fit or something. But an important point to make is that, unlike when you move house and you have to leave your old house behind, when you do a migration, your existing data isn't touched. It's not modified in any way by the import process. So if it all goes horribly wrong, just reopen your existing forums. Just go back to it and then think about why it went wrong and start again when you're ready, or abandon it if it was a total mess. But your existing data is safe. Nothing's going to touch that. Nothing's going to go wrong with it. Which differs from an upgrade where you're going from Zenforo version X to version X plus something, where the data is modified and changed to the new format. So a backup in that particular instance is much more important. One of the go on, Mike.
I was just gonna say, to your point about like how your house, the stuff, you can go back to it if you really want to. I mean, that's why you want to focus on the data structures that do change frequently, the new content types that are created often. And what are those? It's users, threads, and posts predominantly, right? There are other things, of course, depending on your type of site. There could be media, photos and attachments as a whole. That's often another, that's fourth in line, let's say. You might have, obviously your subscribers are up there, but I kind of tie those in with users, right? Mm-hmm. Those 3, 4, 5, there's a couple other, of course, and it depends on your specific. That's what you really want to focus on. But like things like add-ons, even your theme, some of these things, like, yeah, you want to get them right, but there are opportunities depending on what that piece of functionality is to do it later. So stressing about that, if you're in a tight crunch, you're on a platform that's got a security vulnerability, or you just want to give your gifts, your community a gift, of an updated tool, or whatever your rationale is, GDPR. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons. Sometimes just not stressing that, but focusing on those absolutely core structures, I think will give you a little bit of peace of mind in moving forward.
So there's also a couple of questions. Oh, go on, Stuart.
No, go on, Keir, sorry.
I was just going to say that there are a few questions that we get asked again and again and again. So it's worth highlighting some of those here. And one of the ones that we get asked again and again is, what happens to my users' logins? Because any software that's worth its salt these days will not store a plain text password in its database. It'll have it hashed or obfuscated in some way, so that even if someone managed to steal a copy of the database or break into the forum, they wouldn't be able to steal your user's passwords. Now, that potentially throws up a problem, because if the passwords are stored in an encrypted or a hashed format, how on earth are we going to bring them over? Well, what we actually do is we replicate the scheme that your source software used in order to authenticate your users. And we bring that across, and we mark those users as having originated from that particular source software. And then the first time they log in, we'll update them to use the Zenforo scheme, and we'll rewrite all of their secret data with newly hashed information, as if they're just registered freshly. So they won't have any kind of break. They won't have to go and reset their passwords or anything horrifically inconvenient like that. It's seamless.
Yeah, and to the point of when that's not possible, right? There are some situations when your users will have to, you'll be able to migrate them, but not their password, right? There won't be a nice clean migration script. And I just did that 2 days ago, and there were about 9,000, paying subscribers. And the only way that they can get back into their platform, because they were on an old, um, legacy platform, and we were moving it to Zenforo. The only way we could get them to move into the platform was if we told them they had to recover their password, which is, obviously not ideal, but sometimes you have to do that. And what that means is, first of all, you let people know in advance. That's part of the preparing step, right? If you want to know if people are going to have to recover their password or if it'll just keep working as usual. And if they do have to recover it, you want to have a little bit of information, even if it's just clicking the forgot password link or even a little tutorial. And if you want to go crazy, videos, right? Depending on what how important this is for you, you can always spend more time, holding everyone's hand. And sometimes it's very, very helpful. But also once you're on Zenforo, once you've actually migrated, Zenforo is this beautiful system. I use it daily, the notices system. I use it for all kinds of stuff. And you can put up a little notice with a couple clicks that says something like, if you're a guest, show a link or show a message right at the top that says, hey, welcome, we're here. If you want to log in your account, you must click the forgot your password link. Here it is. Click on it. Users will get an email that says, you need to reset your password. They'll click on it. They'll enter a new password, and bam, they're in. And when I did this the other day, we had of the I was checking analytics of the like 400 people online, 300 people had already successfully recovered their password within like an hour. People know how to do this. I mean, obviously, you want to prepare them, but and there will be situations where you have to help some people out, but that's why I always like to include a contact us link next to the notice, just because, yes, if you ever do need to help people, some people don't know how to do this, or for some reason they're not getting an email for various reasons, but for the most part, they'll be fine.
So one thing that people often ask is how long is this going to take, and what can I do to speed it up? Because one of the caveats of the official importer system is that it has to be done in one hit. You close down your existing forums temporarily, and then you start the import. And then when you open up, then theoretically everything that has that was in the paused state of your existing forums will be moved over. And the reason that it has to work like that is that the data has to be imported sequentially, and if we've if we've imported 1 million posts, and then at the end of that, post 1 has had its content changed, then it would be a very complex process to go back and do what's called a delta import. So the official importers don't support a delta import, where you go back and you import what's changed. There are third-party ones out there that do, but in a lot of cases they don't import the data in quite such a complete fashion. So there's a trade-off there between the speed at which you import, the completeness of the import, and whether or not you can leave your existing forums open while you do the import. But if I carry on talking about the way the official importers work, how can you make it faster? Well, some people will put a very fast web server next to a very fast database server and have them on separate machines connected over a very fast network connection. That never works, because the amount of individual queries that the import process does creates a huge amount of network latency, and you'll end up finding that the amount of time the two servers spend negotiating their connection with each other dwarfs the amount of time that's actually being spent talking to the database. So we always recommend that you find the biggest, fastest, baddest server that you can and do everything on that one server. If you're doing a huge import, pay for an enormous server and pay for a month's use of that enormous server, because it will do a better job than trying to do it on separate servers or on your live production server.
Yep, that's what we recommend as well. And there is transferring the database, which will take some time, but other than that, running, if you're on a big board, you'll definitely want to do something like that.
And even if you have something fast. So we migrated from vBulletin to Zenforo in 2013, and then from Zenforo 1 to 2, what was that, 3 years ago or something like that, a while after it came out, because it required us to rewrite the editorial system, and so many of the other add-ons we were using, about 90 add-ons then. We use 80 now, I just counted them. And that import, we started it off and in the end had to just leave it running overnight. It just took so long. I don't know if that was because our server was slow, and like you say, Keir, we got separate file serving and database servers, web and database servers, and it just took ages. But it's, and the forums are offline, and that's the worst hit you take. Even if you kind of abort it and go back, that's the worst hit you take. Is that, I think, is that your site's offline. An upgrade is perhaps more tricky, because like you say, if you do upgrade the data, then rolling back unless you restore from a backup is going to be, it's going to be difficult. And
that's why doing, I think, like a test upgrade or something, depending on the size of your board, if you have the resources to do this, definitely do it, because it'll tell you things like how long it'll take and what worked and what didn't work, and give your the marketing team, the leadership team, your moderators, core power users, perhaps you can kind of even just send them a demo if it's a migration. If it's an upgrade, it's a little bit trickier to do that. And I think after you've done one upgrade, one upgrade from Zenforo X to a newer Zenforo version or the latest Zenforo version, I think you'll find your own flow, that's good for you, and it's something that you just, you do it a couple times and you'll get in your own groove. You'll have a process that you develop on your own. But doing those test migrations, I think, are very helpful.
Well, normally upgrading Zenforo is a piece of cake. I mean, one reason why I didn't migrate beyond vBulletin 3 point something or other was because Keir wasn't in charge of it anymore. And don't want to make him blush, but something that I really love about Zenforo is the fact that when they release updates, they're solid. I mean, I've been coding since the 80s, and you don't want to be an early adopter of software. That's something I'm quite comfortable being when it comes to new versions of Zenforo. It was only going from Zenforo 1 to 2 that was particularly difficult, because, and I understood the thinking behind it, Keir, you wanted to basically refresh the software and build it again from the ground up, making it as good as you could possibly do, and that's not going to happen again, and that was a one-off. The rest of the time now, upgrading Zenforo is a piece of cake. I mean, and you've designed it as much as you can to be like a 1 or 2 button process, haven't you? 1 or 2 clicks.
We have, and we have a very strict set of rules in terms of what we put into new versions. So I think this is documented somewhere, but there will never be a new feature in a 3rd point release. So you can absolutely guarantee backwards compatibility between 2.2.1 and 2.2.3, for example. If there's going to be new features, then it will be in a 2nd point release, and that may involve database table alters. So those are a much meatier upgrade. And a 1st point release going from, say, version 2 to version 3 would involve a major backwards compatibility break. But we're not planning any of those in the near future. So, I mean, to give you an illustration of the amount of time we spend wringing our hands over whether or not to do things, there's a feature that we're considering for Zenforo 2.3, but it would involve an alter on the post table. And if you're running a site with an enormous amount of posts, then an alter on the post table is a big deal. So this feature is currently in the balance because we don't know if it's worth the pain of forcing everyone to run an alter on the post table. It's a big deal.
Yeah, if you've got sort of tens of millions of posts, it takes a while. And yeah, but generally, you know, the decisions you make about what features to put in and whether they're worth it, I would just say, "I'll go for it," and we'll go through the brief moment of pain to upgrade for the, you know, the benefits afterwards. I just want to circle briefly around to something we were talking about before, and that is deciding what functionality to keep. So Mike, when you were saying about how, you know, you focus on your threads, your users, your threads, your posts, and then a few of those like reactions. Some people, I mean, if there are people out there now running VB3 or VB4 forums, why haven't they migrated to Zenforo or, you know, more modern software already? Because you know, it's infinitely better, and you know, there's no argument about the benefits. So why haven't people done it? I think some of the times it might be because they've got functionality which they probably maybe paid quite a lot of money for to enhance their forum, and you know, that isn't available. So part of the process of migrating, you have to basically say, okay, I have this particular functionality and I don't want to lose that. So is that somewhere on Zenforo already? As Keir said, you know, it might exist, but under a different name in a different form, you can achieve the same things. You know, way back in 2013, migrating to Zenforo, of course, the community was smaller. It was still in its infancy, and there weren't as many add-ons available. There weren't as many great companies like yours, Mike, who's basically there to support people. And so, you know, there was, perhaps you might be having to say goodbye to some functionality. Now it's less like that, and or you've also got you know, a community there of developers who are quite happy to work for you to create the functionality that you need. So it's migrating is tough, and even upgrading actually from Zenforo 1 to Zenforo 2, because there were some add-ons which the authors decided not to migrate, and you know, so that delays a lot of people. I mean, just and there are other things that commercial forums as well. So if you're making money from it, say if you're running adverts and you need that to pay your mortgage and, more importantly, people's wages who are working for you, you can't migrate unless you can have those adverts up and running as soon as you're, you know, as soon as possible after your forum is migrated. And there are other elements as well. Our customers pay for featured threads, manufacturers and retailers, and you know, the features threads add-on didn't make it originally from Zenforo 1 to Zenforo 2. Thank goodness Audentio created, you know, a featured threads add-on which we could use. So, you know, there are some circumstances where the add-ons have to make it.
We have a question directed at you. So while you're talking, this might fit in. It says, Stuart, did you use the GUI or the CLI as an import tool?
The CLI definitely,
Okay.
just because it's so much faster. In fact, the whole process of migrating is so long and well, for me anyway, I just wanted to be so organized, and it was long process because we had a lot of add-ons to do. So I just created spreadsheets, and even down to helping myself out at the time by saying, okay, when I log into the shell to run the CLI, this is the password that I could, that's like a non-memorable password that I need to use to copy from my spreadsheet into Absolute Telnet to connect to the site. And these are the CLI commands to run to do the various upgrades and maybe drop these tables out of the database, do various other things. And having a sandbox to be able to run through that whole process on is really important. We have a sandbox running all the time now, and you know, we keep it in parallel with AV forums, and the add-ons that I install, I'll put on the sandbox first to make sure that they don't break that, and that's invaluable if you're migrating or upgrading, to try stuff out on the sandbox first, because you know, especially if it's a commercial forum, you don't want it to go down. So yeah.
The terminal version is an interesting subject to talk about, because the first thing I would say to people is, if you have terminal access to your server, don't be afraid of using the CLI version of the importer. It's much faster than doing it through the web interface. but there's no pain involved in it because all of the setup that you need to do, like pointing it to the correct data and choosing your preferences, is all done through the web interface. So you just get it set up and then leave the web interface alone and start it on the command line, and it will whiz through so much faster than the web version can. Mostly because the web version has to be, each request to the web server has to be time limited to something that will prevent the web server from timing out the request. And as a result, it's not very well optimized because the web server simply cannot run very long scripts. They time out and things go horribly wrong. And so the web version has to have all sorts of fail safes to make sure that in the event that something does time out, then it can pick up and resume where it left off, which puts a huge overhead on the process. The command line version doesn't have any of that fail safe stuff because it doesn't need to. All it needs to know is that it can resume where it left off if it needs to. But there's no time limit on how long that can run for. So provided you're doing something sensible like running it through a detached screen command, which I think there might even be documentation on the web, so that even if your connection to the terminal gets severed, it carries on running in the background, then you can reconnect to it later. It's definitely the way to go.
Awesome. If it's okay with you guys, I'm going to keep plugging away at the questions because we do have 6 more. And thank you to everyone who submitted. A lot of these are really good. And it does look like several of you have said that you run your own boards, which is great. Somebody asks, and this might be, I mean, it might, I don't know all of your backgrounds, but it might be applicable to all of you. It says, what if you are a one-man show? How can I do this? I don't have a different tech guy, server admin, etc.
Well, the beauty of Zenforo is that it's built for people who enjoy doing this and do it not only as a hobby but as a sole proprietorship. Or I mean, Zenforo can be used by anybody. And I mean, when I first started running my forums, I was by myself. I didn't know anything about programming or migrations or anything. And you just kind of you give it a go. There's so many resources out there, and I wouldn't be deterred as long as you've got the the will to give it a go. Go for it. We have the benefit of Kier not only being a seasoned backend developer, but he's also, in my opinion, a product developer. I closely watched him early in my career. I loved random thought, but I love the VB3 theming system and some of those little product decisions. So like when you are going to be building or running a migration, just like you said, he knows when to put something in the GUI to make it easier for you and save you some time when the CLI could seem daunting with lots of different flags and everything else. So maybe developers, people who are, I guess, less inclined on the systems administration side, and I know this seems like a systems DevOps project, I think the migration process in general was kind of built with that in mind, which is very smart from the Zenforo team. So I wouldn't be deterred.
And ask people as well. If go into the community and ask, because people are more than willing to help if you've got any questions, which may already have been answered. So do a search first. If you can't find the answer there, ask.
It's kind of funny because like that's the beauty of forums, right? When you got a problem, you don't land on Instagram, you don't land on Facebook, you land on a forum. So use the forums. That's what they're there for. Sorry.
That's true.
We have a newly submitted question that hasn't been touched on. Don't know if it's applicable. It says, is it possible to find out the current roadmap Zenforo? So I'm not 100% if that's sure what they're asking, honestly.
It's not, well, I don't know if that's specific to like maybe they're planning a future migration or a future upgrade. I
they
mean,
just want inside information on what's
or
coming.
They want inside. They got Kier's attention.
In terms of is there access to the future Zenforo roadmap? In short, no. There are things that we had intended to put into 2.2 that during the development of 2.2 dropped off because the market and the internet is changing so fast all the time that announcing a roadmap for something that we intend to do a year down the line is meaningless, because we will probably have changed our mind by the time we get there. So sometimes it's better to not say that we're intending to do something, so that people don't base their decisions on an expectation that something's going to happen that they're then going to be disappointed about. So we tend to announce things at the point that they are near as damn it ready. And that will continue for the foreseeable future at this point.
Excellent. I think both of you, well, I think Mike and Kier may have touched on this a little bit. But for someone like me, when you're discussing scripts, I assume that is referring to code and not templates of any kind, like not an actual script.
Well, what we're really referring to, I think, yeah, because script is such a generic term here.
Right.
We're kind of referring to the actual, like, I think in this context, a piece of code that essentially takes one piece of data and moves that data into a Zenforo structure. That's the migration script. So, for example, your thread titles might be called thread_title in your current software, and they might just be called title in Zenforo, right? So when you migrate, there actually has to be some code in the script that specifically says, what is the old, where is the old data, and how are we moving it to the new system?
Okay, that was actually a me question, because I wanted to ask this user question and I wanted to make sure I understood it. They're asking, do you have templates for planning these migrations? Which I think we touched on briefly, but
yeah, we do. I will be sharing, by the time this YouTube goes live, some of my resources that I use, because again, I do this kind of, especially end of year. We've done 5 in the last 2 weeks, so depending, hopefully some of all of our resources, and I'm sure maybe even Stu has. He's been doing it for so long. How long, Stu? Have you been in the community space?
2000. We were supposed to have a 20th birthday party this year, but it would have been illegal.
Well, yeah. So I mean, we've all got resources. I think there is something to maybe pooling some of these resources a bit more. At least I know I should, because again, we have them. I just need to publish them. But yes, I think by the time this video goes on YouTube, we'll share some of those.
Awesome. Yeah, our first video, by the way, has been shared. I think Zenforo's is at zenforo.com/insights. And as for Audentio, we've shared on our social media, and we're going to do the same with this episode. I think do we have time for one last question?
Yeah, I'd say
Okay.
so.
I'm good for a while.
Awesome. This one says, I run a forum since 2012 and use custom pages, and I'm searching for a way to migrate this to Zenforo 2.2, still running XF1. Does this still work like the old way? Couldn't find a new topic about it.
So
Pages are different, aren't they? It depends how custom the pages are.
Yeah, they're talking about page nodes here. If whoever made the comment, if you want to clarify a little bit more, is it page nodes? No,
because some of the scripting in templates is different in Zenforo 2, and that tends to break some of the elements of Zenforo 1.
Template syntax did change quite dramatically in Zenforo 2. So if there is Zenforo 1 template syntax in those custom pages, then that will need to be adapted. A lot of it still works, but you would need to do an audit to find out whether or not there's stuff that doesn't exist. So I'm trying to remember how Zenforo 1 even looked. I don't think we had the concept. Wasn't it Zen colon?
Yeah.
Right.
No, it's XF.
Now it's XF colon for everything. And
which
some of the
I'm
stuff
actually grateful you did, though, because now we can kind of clearly tell, the difference sometimes. But
yeah.
An example for us then is to try and save time. When people are contacting us about various things, I created a custom page which is basically a list of frequently asked questions why people might contact us. So if you go to the contact page on AV Forums, there it is. And I want it to be nice and fancy so that you click something, one of the questions, and then the possible answers drop down, and then you can click another one. Oh, and then some more answers drop down. That broke completely in Zenforo too, so I had to basically rewrite that. But you know, it's search and replace.
And for me, I mean, thinking as more of like an engineer here, I ask myself, okay, how many are there, right? Is the time to write a script going to save me the time to just do it manually, the time it takes to do manually? So if you've got 30 pages, maybe you don't want to write a script because, it'll be easier to just, copy those over manually, reformat them. But if you've got, 20, thousands, right? Or even hundreds, really, depending on who you have in your team, I would definitely consider writing a script. And there's a number of ways you can do that. You can do that based on the HTML output. You can do it based on whatever the previous data structure is, like if it was a node page type or if it was a help page type, right? In Zenforo 2, I don't know, that wasn't a thing in Zenforo 1, right? The help pages system.
No, I think that's new. So we've got a clarification. It's use it like custom classes. So as in your pages are going to have a callback that then renders a dynamically generated page, I guess. Yes, that all still exists, but those custom classes, which are no doubt going to be extensions of abstract Zenforo classes, are going to need some attention. I hesitate to say that they will need to be completely rewritten, because although they will, but once you've done a couple of them and you've worked out which bits of Zenforo 1 have migrated over to Zenforo 2 in a different format, it should be relatively straightforward to adapt the structures that you're using and get the rest of those custom classes redone. And a lot of the principles are quite similar.
We do still have a very small handful of questions, but
yes, shoot them off. I mean, I know we're at the hour, but
yeah.
I'm here for a while. If I know Stu is, we'll hang out. If anyone has
Sure.
questions for a little bit longer.
I'm gonna start with this one. It says, "What's the importance of importing internal data?" And it has a little underscore. Is that what it's called? Internal underscore data and data. Do you necessarily need these directories to import?
Well, sure, because go ahead, Kier.
So what's the necessity of the importance of importing them? Well, maybe a quick description of what they are. The data directory is stuff that's going to be served directly out through your web server. So something like your user avatars, there's no point having them piped through a PHP script, although I think they actually are. But fundamentally, they can be directly accessed by entering a URL and you get to them. Whereas internal data is protected from public access. So it's going to have things like if we write out a code cache, or if we write out the raw PHP for the compiled template code, all of that gets stuffed into internal data where it can't be accidentally stumbled upon by someone who just enters a random URL. Is that stuff important? Yes, it's critically important. Your attachments, your avatars, and anything that's been uploaded, it will be stored in those directories. So is it important? Yes, it's vital. But I'm not sure if that is the question.
Well, when you say vital, it's vital if you're a community that relies on that, right? I mean, there are many communities who, for various technical reasons, budget reasons, whatever, they may not even be able to import avatars or attachments. And that would be a very sad day, right? Because users will try to find some type of resource they uploaded a while ago, or they'll wonder why their avatar didn't move over, or any number of things. But at the end of the day, what is most important? It's making sure users are accounted for, that they're thought of, that they're kept in the loop, that they feel valued, and that if you have to, for some technical or budgetary reason, leave something out, just communicate it with them.
Yeah, your users will tend to be understanding. Forum admins are an incredibly picky bunch. and they enjoy their niches, and they get very hung up on particular things that they think are absolutely vital. But when it actually comes to talking to your visitors, they're almost never as neurotic as the administrator is, and they will put up with an awful lot of change, so long as you hold their hand through the process and point them to the right places.
Yeah, and you know, even after you do the migration, because you know, I mean, this format was just supposed to be like, you know, a community type roundtable, right? But like, you know, after you do that migration, you know, letting people know what went well, what didn't went well, because you know, you never know. There's a lot of things going on when you're moving from, you know, a completely different, nuanced software to a new one. But I think that's the key thing in all my history of doing migrations: communicate. And I know it's so corny and cheesy to say that, but just tell people what's going on. And as long as you did that, especially as early as you can, if something should change from the plan, your moderators, your core community members, you know, they'll pick up that slack. You know, for the people who are complaining about it, because you'll always get some complainers on a migration. You know, they'll link to them and say, hey, well, they mentioned this, right? Or they said this could happen, or you know what, that might have happened, but look at all these cool other features we got. When you tell people in advance, when you communicate, you get them on your side for a migration, and that's the theme here, right? That's the most important part. I know we've talked so much about the technical details, you know, and the technical details are significant and important, but don't forget why we're all doing this, right? We're doing this to make sure that people have a place to enjoy their favorite, perhaps their favorite place on the whole internet, right? So keep those people in mind whenever you make any type of decision.
So there was one other point that that I forgot to mention earlier, when I was talking about questions that we get asked, and one of the questions we get asked is, okay, if I'm moving to a whole new software, what happens to all the pages that I've got indexed on Google or any other search engine? And the good news is that for all of our major importers, we maintain that the Zenforo import system maintains a data connection between the original data and the new data. So if you bring across a thread from vBulletin and it had a thread ID of 9052, and when you bring it into Zenforo, it gets a thread ID of something else, then we have a system of redirects that you can place over the when you're ready to shut down your old forums. You can replace their scripts with the redirect system, and any hits that try to visit, say, showthread.php from vBulletin, will be intercepted and seamlessly and transparently and permanently redirected to the corresponding data in Zenforo. And it uses an HTTP 301 redirect. So when a search engine comes across it, it will not de-index the page. It will just look at the new one seamlessly, so that you won't find that stuff that has been lovingly curated by the search engine is suddenly lost by moving software.
Awesome. I have another couple questions. This one says, how do you ensure URLs from the...
And that's pretty much what Kier's alluding to right there is, you know, how do they redirect correctly? Yeah, so that's pretty much what Kier...
Okay, perfect. The last question is, any thoughts, I don't understand a word of this, but any thoughts on changing the front end to act more like an SPA with something like React of Angular hitting the API?
And I could take that one because
Cool.
we do that all the time.
Awesome.
Zenforo is an API that will allow you to do that. Now the question is, and I get this all the time too, shouldn't the whole forum be a single page application React environment? And I would love to hear an answer from Kier, but before that, you know, I think if you're trying to accomplish certain particular things, like what do I do all the time? I grab the notices from Zenforo and put them into an SPA. I grab sometimes the navigation items. I grab comments and posts sometimes. I grab a thread if I've got a single page application WordPress and I want to show a little widget of the recent threads. The API will handle all of that. You know, you need to be a developer, of course, to do that, or have a developer on standby to do that. But yeah, it is totally possible to do that. Here, I'll defer to you to add to that because I want to listen now.
Okay, so the idea of building on top of a framework like React or something like that has been suggested a lot of times, and the biggest obstacle to doing that is the amount of business logic that would then be in your templates, and it's an enormous obstacle to allowing the kind of customization that we currently allow right now. Even a relative novice with HTML can take Zenforo and make it look like their own, so long as you maintain the template syntax. But as soon as you start taking the core application and trying to run it as an SPA, then it gets incredibly complicated. And it just throws up so many barriers to the kind of customization that people are used to. So maybe it's something for the future, it's like a spin-off version perhaps, but for the core Zenforo product, I don't think the time has come yet.
And you have to think about it too. I mean, like, you know, why do a lot of people love Zenforo? I think they're in awe with the amount of features, and like you were saying, it's very difficult to maybe replicate some of that in an environment like that. But I mean, the child theming system, the style properties, the template modifications could become an issue with that type of environment, I would imagine. Just add-ons in general. I mean, it's all possible, but I mean, the question you have to ask is why, I guess, at first. And yeah, I think everyone likes to jump to the latest and greatest technology, but you know, and sometimes, you know, there's many reasons why I think PHP is still one of the best ways that you could do a forum, especially given how many add-ons there are and how many everythings there are. It's just so tried and true that, you know, it's just so stable and it just works. Because I mean, that's the reason why I kind of like the environment that Zenforo is, maybe perhaps over what that might be. If you need that, there's applications for that, right? There's a methodology, there's the API. But you know, that's just my 2 cents there. But
a long time ago, I started looking at potentially using Bootstrap as the basis for some of the Zenforo JavaScript and some of the original client-side stuff that goes on in Zenforo. But the more I dug into it, the more it mandated particular structures in the HTML and particular classes that had to be applied. And as soon as you started to customize it even a little bit, the functionality started to break. And so, geez, this must be way back in the beginning. But so back for Zenforo 1, I came across the JavaScript framework that produced the original overlays and the original fades and things. That the great thing about it was that it didn't mandate any particular HTML structure. It didn't make you scatter your code with stuff that spoke directly to it. And for Zenforo 2, we've redone that even more, so that there isn't an underlying JavaScript framework that you have to stick to. But again, I said again, it's starting to look at React or some of these other very high level frameworks changes an awful lot of the assumptions that you can make about the way that Zenforo works at all, and can make some things that we take for granted very difficult.
I loved getting to talk with everybody here. You know,
Yeah.
This has been fun. I feel like we could talk about migrations and upgrades so much, but I don't know. Like, if we had to conclude, you know, how could I sum it all up? You know, I think our 3 little bullet points, right? Like, you know, I think that's a good place to start. And I think what I'll do is I'll maybe write a little bit of a summary here at the end, just to kind of, you know, group some of these, you know, very important things to do when migrating or upgrading. But I think the overall thing that I'd like to say as a closing would be to not stress. You know, there's many thousands of boards who've migrated successfully, no problem. And if you have a concern or question, just ask. I mean, the community is here waiting. We do this all the time, and it's something that, you know, if you're stuck on something, let us know. And when it comes to your community, just communicate. Like I said, they'll be happy with whatever you do as long as you care.
And when you finally come to actually do it, practice, have an idea of what your end goal is, do a dry run if you can. Take it easy, make sure that the data that you want has come across, test it, and then go with it.
I lost the comment, but one of the attendees mentioned that they did something like 15 practice sessions before before the big day. So lots of stories
Sometimes
out
you
there.
need to. Yeah,
Mhm.
sometimes you need to. Sometimes I just talked with one of the biggest forums I know of, and they ran the migration script one time and it worked. Okay.
Nice.
So we're very happy with that. So it just depends. You know, forums are known for being so uniquely created for a very particular type of use case, and it's going to be different for everybody. But, you know, that's why we are all here to help.
Have everybody around at the end as well to tackle any unexpected circumstances. So, you know, we all know and love Chris Deeming, don't we? He was around when AV Forums migrated and was able to, this was before he was a member of Zenforo staff, and was able to, you know, just tackle any issues that there were. And it's
But-
great just knowing that you know, if something isn't behaving properly, you've got a coder who can just jump straight in there and say, oh, yep, this is what it is. I'll put a quick fix in there for you now, and we'll sort that out later on.
And I kind of remember you and I, Stu, iterating over that theme. Wasn't that right? You know, didn't I? Am I making that up, or did I work on the theme at one point?
Yeah, we worked together on some stuff. I made the mistake actually of having a designer design AV forums, and this designer had never worked on websites before.
Uh-oh.
Photoshop job.
Yeah, so shoehorning. I mean, he still gets a credit on the site because he did come up with some nice ideas, but it's changed so much since then. But yeah. Oh, and folks, don't assume that people will accept it if you change the main font.
Yeah.
Because ours were up in arms when we threw out Verdana from VBulletin and went to Trebuchet in Zenforo. People didn't like that at all, so we quickly, just to placate people, we went back for a long while, even though it looks like an ancient font now.
It's part of your brand now. It's part of your charm, right? Sometimes it's for the community, right? That's why you do it.
So I think one thing that's that's worth noting is, like I said earlier, that the fact that the migration process doesn't touch your existing data. If you've got a migration that you're planning to do in 6 months' time, there's nothing stopping you doing a test import there and then. All you need is the Zenforo software and somewhere to do it, and you can test as much as you like. So you're going to have some idea of what your imported product is going to look like, and if it doesn't bring across the data that you need, then find someone who can help you out.
I've loved this format of roundtable, and what I'd like to do is in the future kind of go back and forth between the more structured topics and demos and this kind of format. I think both have benefits. And thank you so much, Stuart, for being here. I'm sure that there are people who are in shoes that you were once in that got a lot out of that. And we're going to share this. We're going to do the same thing we did last time, kind of cut it and put it on YouTube and share it socially. So
you're welcome.
for
Thank you very
episode,
much for the opportunity.
Thanks, Stuart.
and
yeah,
it's nice to
Thanks,
hang out with my friends. And thank you,
absolutely.
Megan, for being in charge.
Of course. I'm learning a lot as well, honestly. So any final words, or should we see people in episode 3?
Brian, we will be doing a lot more of these. We're enjoying them.
Cool.
Yep. Have a very Merry Christmas or holiday in general, and have a fantastic end of the year. I can't wait for the year to be done, and I think
Same.
many people will agree. We will definitely be doing this early next year.
Yes, absolutely. Episode 3 next year.
Yeah, and if
Thank
you
you
guys
so
have
much.
ideas for topics, this is an informal format. We
Mhm.
want to hear from you guys. So if you have some topic that you've been really wanting to hear about, particularly bugging Mike, Chris, and Kier about what's going on. I was kidding. No, anything at all. Just we'd love to hear about new suggestions. But from my end, have a great end of the year, everybody. Thanks, Kira,
too.
Stu, Megan. It was a
Thanks,
pleasure.
everyone.
Thanks,
Stay
We're looking
safe,
forward to
everybody.
next year too.
All
Good
right,
stuff
take care,
coming
guys.
up.
Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
all.